Let's move on to part 2. In this part of the video, which is about 10 minutes long, I will explain a few things about the lymphatic organs. This is where B cells, but also T cells, develop, differentiate, and proliferate. Lymphatic system organs are either primary or secondary. Primary lymphoid organs are two: the bone marrow, the inside of the bone, and the gland called thymus. Secondary organs are the spleen, the lymph nodes, and the lymphatic cells found in the submucosal tissue of certain organs, such as the gastrointestinal tract, the lungs, and the urinary tract, and many more. We call it mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue, MALT. We will come back to this later on when we're going to talk about MALT lymphomas. Now, let's start explaining the primary lymphoid organs. The bone marrow is a spongy substance found in the center of the bones. There are two types of bone marrow, red and yellow. Yellow bone marrow is made mostly of fat. The red bone marrow produces the multipotent hematopoietic stem cell. Do you remember the multicolor lizard? They can become red, white blood cells or platelets, as we have seen in part 1 of this video. So, red bone marrow looks like a factory where all cells are produced. The B cells reach maturity within the bone marrow. So, we now are going to remember B for B cells that mature in the bone marrow. Good. Thymus is the other primary lymphoid organ. It is situated in the upper chest behind the breastbone, the sternum, right here. The thymus gland is most active during childhood. It produces T cells, so we have all the T cells we need by the time we reach puberty. After that, our thymus gland slowly starts to decrease in size and it's replaced by fat. Thymus gland works like a school for the T cells. T cells are produced in the bone marrow and then they migrate to the thymus to mature, to be trained. The specific training they receive is how to recognize and remember an invader. So, we will remember T for T cells that mature in the thymus. Very good. Let's move on to the secondary lymphoid organs. Spleen. It has three important functions. It works as a filter. He is able to filter the blood in order to eliminate bacteria and viruses, and many more. It stores the cells. In this way, spleen controls the level of the blood cells. Spleen is also a kind of a recycle bin. This organ is able of removing from circulation any old or damaged blood cell. Now, let's have a closer look to the spleen. Spleen consists of two functional and anatomical parts. The red pulp is made of the venous sinus and a tissue known as cords, which is rich in macrophages. This is where old and damaged cells are eliminated, where the recycling happens. This is also where the stock of the red blood cells and the platelets is. The white pulp consists of three zones. The pink zone is called periarteriolar lymphocyte sheath. Very difficult. Let's call it PALS. This is where T lymphocytes are mainly located. The yellow zone is called the marginal zone. It contains B cells and macrophages. These green circles are called the lymphoid follicles. Follicles are formed from B cells and they can be primary or secondary. We will talk more about them later on. Now let's take an even closer look and see What happens when invaders, for example viruses or bacteria, enter the spleen? Let's say that these are the invaders, small viruses or bacteria or whatever, invaders. And these are T cells in the periarteriolar zone. T cells. Let's write it down. These are B cells in the follicular zone, in the follicle. These are naive B cells, meaning not in contact yet with an antigen. They look like T cells, right? So, these are the macrophages in the marginal zone, the yellow zone. Macrophages present the antigen to the other cells. Okay, so now the antigen enters the spleen from the circulation. It activates the T cells. These in turn activate B cells to become antibody-producing B cells, called plasma cells. I'm not showing them yet here. We're gonna talk a lot about them on the next video. Another way for the invader to get in the spleen is directly through the follicle. He activates the B cell, he presents the antigen to the T cell, and the T cell reactivates the B cell to become plasma cell and produce antibodies. This is called co-stimulation. Do you remember that T cells are like generals in the army? They tell others what to do. Finally, macrophages can pick an antigen and present it to the T cells, and they will ask B cells to become plasma cells again, and so on. We will get into depth in the future sessions. Another secondary lymphoid organ is the lymph node. Lymph nodes are kidney-shaped structures connected with each other with lymph vessels. The green region around the lymph vessel is called medullary sinus, and it contains macrophages, the cells that present antigen to others. The yellow region is called medulla. Here, the medulla contains the plasma cells. Of course, we know now what plasma cells are, but repetition makes perfection. B cells are able of producing antibodies. Then we have the paracortical zone, this white zone here. This is rich in T lymphocytes. The pink region is the cortex. It contains B lymphocytes. Okay. Now, the follicles, we know them from the spleen. They contain also B lymphocytes. B lymphocytes. Follicles in the lymph nodes are either primary, meaning immature, containing naive B lymphocytes, not in contact yet with an antigen, and secondary, meaning more mature. Secondary follicles are the centers of production of the B memory cells. Okay, now this small red circle here is called the germinal center. It is formed from rapidly dividing cells after antigen stimulation. We will talk a lot about this in the next video. And now, last but not least, secondary lymphoid organ is the mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue, MALT. MALT is the most extensive component of the human lymphoid tissue. It consisted of small concentrations of lymphoid tissue found in various submucosal membrane sites of the body, such as the gastrointestinal trunk, the nasopharynx, the eye, the skin, and of course the lungs and the genitourinary system, and many more. It's pretty much everywhere in the body where an entrance for an invader can be found. They are full of B, T, lymphocytes, plasma cells, macrophages, and they all protect our body. Let's say that MALT could be the gatekeepers. That was my introduction in B cells. Thank you for watching this video.